So the man is here, the man of the hour, or maybe man of the 40 minutes now. It's Mr. Edward, and you guys will know him as Edward Creates, but he is Edward's son from Atlanta, Georgia. Maybe Edward, just tell the people that are watching right now something that we don't know about you and what you do as a job.
Yeah, I am. I'm a full-time graphic designer at an agency in Buford, which is just 30 minutes north of Atlanta. And we do a bunch of different creative projects, but that's my full-time thing. And then outside of that, I guess most people don't know that I also rap on the side sometimes. That's my go-to fun fact, but I haven't since COVID started. But like my last show was actually the week before lockdown here in the States. But
That's cool.
but yeah, that's me.
Yeah, I mean, like, I actually knew Edward when we first, I guess we kind of got on the scene at the same time, like on Instagram. It was I think it was around a similar time because I remember like we were connecting quite a lot in
Hmm.
like sort of early 2020. And I knew you more at that time for your music than I did for your designs. And now it's like the other way around. Now you're
Wow.
like, obviously because of COVID, you are now Mr. Graphics Man. And like
Yeah.
anytime I need inspiration, like Pinterest is one thing, but going to Edward Creates and just seeing some of the stuff he creates, man, is like,
Wow.
you guys, if you guys don't follow him, go and follow him right now. Like, just take a moment, go on to @Edward Creates on Instagram and go and check out his stuff, because I think this is going to help set the scene for when we start talking about some of the things we're going to talk about today. Now, for those of you that don't know what this is Hot Topics, and this is episode 2. So we do this every month, the third Thursday of every month, and this is basically us having some controversial discussions around the creative world. So last time it was talking about feedback. How do we receive feedback? How do we give feedback? Should we always listen to feedback? And that was with Josh Whiting, otherwise known as Bright Cole. You can go and check that out on the Project Media YouTube channel, the full video. It's really cool. He says some really awesome stuff. But this week, we are talking about maybe it's not the client that's the problem. And Edward, why don't you just share? Like, we started connecting about this probably about 2 months ago, maybe a month ago. And I was like, what do you like have on your heart to share? And this was really led by Edward. So Edward, why don't you just share some of the stuff that you're like excited to talk about today?
Yeah, I just think there's a lot of complaining going on among designers about clients, and of course this is like, I mean, a lot of it is legitimate. There are crazy clients, and there's a lot of difficulty in dealing with clients, but I think the default has been too often like the client is wrong and they're destroying this project, and because of the client, this is not going to turn out well. When in reality, it's a lot of the responsibility is on the designer to make sure that the client is educated, and that you manage the client relationship and challenge the client to grow creatively, because they don't have the vision that creatives have.
Sure.
And so, yeah, I think just like taking more responsibility for if the end product is actually not great, a lot more of it has to do with the designer than the client. That
Wow.
is what I am passionate about talking about today.
Yeah. So maybe let's just get started on this, and let's, I guess, kickstart this week's hot topics. What's like what are the common areas that you see with creatives? So we talk about like complaining, but like have you got any examples, or have you seen anything in your own like creative journey or through designers on Instagram or in the community where you've seen like this classic example of these communication barriers like not working well together? Like this is not what helping this project move forward.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it starts with the art direction, like right off the bat. When the client's like, "This is what I want," like let's say I want like a sermon series graphic, or I want a logo, or whatever it might be. At that point, they will have an idea, and then they will tell you, "This is what I want. I want a rabbit with a bunch of balloons," right? And then you're gonna be like, "That sounds like a terrible idea. But they're paying me, so I'm gonna do it, right?" And then you just complain, I guess. Or you come up with some options that you feel like are really strong, and then uh, to maybe throw in an option that's a little weaker, and then the client chooses the weaker one, and then decides, can we actually have the weaker one without all the good stuff in it, and
Hmm.
then instead of having that conversation with them and challenging them using their language, we would I guess, even myself, when I was just starting out, I would also just do it, and then in the end be like, all right, I'm going to send this off to you, but I'm never going to let anyone see this or let anyone know that I did this.
I've been there. I've
Um,
done those exact projects you're talking about.
yeah, exactly. And I know that those will be there always to an extent. But I think that's a lot of the things. It's just like at the very beginning when you receive the art direction, and then uh, during the feedback process is a lot that happens a lot, I think. And then yeah, I think those are the two main points where this communication breakdown happens, or the opportunity presents itself for the designer to step in. Um,
Yeah.
but oftentimes we don't. So
Yeah, and just a thought popped into my head, like while you were saying that, is I think this is where it's really important for creatives to understand their niche and not be scared of like really like narrowing down on something that they're really good at. Because what happens is, what quite often this art direction of this client will just be looking for a designer, and if you're like the jack of all trades and you can do everything, quite often it's much easier for this like mismatch to happen where the client turns up looking for one thing and it doesn't match your style. But because you've promoted yourself as the jack of all trades, you're now like, oh yeah, I can do this, but it's not what I'm passionate about. We spoke with Nick Goodner from Creative Church on Monday, and his passion really is like creatives understanding what they're passionate about and working from that. And
mm,
this is like one of the huge things that I think is come out of COVID, is creatives learning like, what is the one thing that I'm passionate about? Is it illustration? Is it Christian designs? Is it like wall art? Whatever it is, like narrowing down on that niche and really working with clients who understand that's like your area of expertise is huge. And like you said, like sometimes you just can't do that. Sometimes there are going to be things that never end up on your portfolio, because it just wasn't how you envisioned it. But I do think that's like a really important area, to like narrow down into, is like, what is your niche? I don't know if you guys say niche, but like, what is that area, um, like that you are good at? And
yeah.
maybe that's part of like self-analysis when you're getting into this space as well. It's like thinking about those things, like, what am I good at, and what can I do that no one else can, and then meeting clients through being the expert essentially.
Yeah, and I would go even farther as to say, like, maybe don't make your niche or your niche, whatever you prefer.
It's the European version.
Maybe don't make your niche your tool that you use, or maybe don't even make it the medium. Don't even make it the style, but instead make it the design thinking, the approach that you take to solving the problem. Because I think at if you can make that the reason that you stand out, like the way that you think about solving their problem, um, then no matter what the tools are going to be, because the tools are going to change, like Photoshop maybe in 20 years is not going to even be the industry. Maybe we're all going to be using Canva and then be using and making Photoshop memes, like we don't even know. But like
Yeah,
if that happens, or, we go more 3D or motion or whatever it may be, then you'll still have the edge. Um,
yeah.
but yeah, I totally agree with what you're saying.
So for a creative then, like, what does a creative look like who complains more than they fix stuff? Like if we're talking about problem solving, and like what you've just said is like using your niche, your area, to be the expert in problem solving when you think about these things strategically, like using that. What happens when it's flipped the other way and instead they're just complaining the whole time? Like, what do you see that creative doing? Do they move forward? Do they advance? Do they learn? Or is it just like stagnant design?
Yeah, I think you would experience burnout eventually. Like you wouldn't be happy doing what you're doing. You wouldn't be able to do the things that you want to do. You wouldn't feel fulfilled creatively. Maybe you'd feel like you need to move on from your current position, wherever you might be. Things like that, I think, are the main issue. And then I think, there's a lot that does have to do with the circumstance in those situations, but there's also a lot that has to do with the way you respond to them also. And I think that's also, if you start out doing freelance work, that's also a way that you will quickly either not have successful projects, or also get burnt out from that. I think those are the main markers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting that you bring up burnout, because I think for a lot of creatives, including myself, I've experienced burnout before,
Mhm.
but I never pinpointed it down to the specific work I was doing or the relationship. I always pinpointed it down to just having too much work, right?
Mhm.
Or it being like, my schedule's not right, or like putting it on me,
Yeah.
which is healthy, to do self-reflection, but at the same time, like understanding like maybe the going into this situation things weren't aligned properly anyway. So a question for you then is, if people are experiencing burnout or experience this like mismatch where things just aren't working, there's this tension, there's this like friction right now. How do we start to tackle this? How do we start to build better client relationships and have better conversations and produce better work?
Yeah. I think there's a great number of tools available to the average person, right? So of course, like, there's going to be resources. Like, there's resources out there that are dedicated just to this, managing relationships with clients. So like, people like you've heard of the Future, and also
Hmm.
Michael Janda, and Jamie Brindle is one of the newer guys on the scene. But all of those, like, if you look at Jamie Brindle's entire feed, it's just reels of him role playing client conversations.
Oh, this is the guy where it loops, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
every single video has this perfect loop. Yeah,
exactly.
yeah,
And he's always drinking LaCroix, and he's always like
yeah.
wearing a Hawaiian shirt. Yeah.
We one guys, yeah, Hawaiian shirt.
Yeah. So
Love it.
of course, like, I would recommend, like, consume as much of that type of content as you can to learn, because you ultimately need to change the way that you think about it. But I would also say, like, personally, in my experience, there are a few key things that I've learned to do that minimize this conflict or this tension. And one of the things is, having some way to get a feel for what the client wants, actually, right? Like, taking a subjective word and putting it into a concrete expression, right? So if somebody's like, yo, Edward, I want a minimal, modern, trendy design, that could mean a billion different things to different people, right? Like, what I think is minimal could be not minimal to someone else, or modern or whatever. And so what I would do is then I would put together like a mood board that says, hey, this is modern and minimal and etc. And then I would point out, like, let's say I was using a tool like Milanote that has like the blocks and then you can add the captions and everything. I would put something in there and then I would say, this is minimal because, and then I would explain, because there's more negative space than there is any design elements, or this is modern, as opposed to what you would see traditionally. You know what I'm saying? Like, I would
Yeah,
explain why, this is objectively a modern design, right?
yeah,
And things like that before I even do any design work. Like, I need to make sure that what they're thinking is exactly what I'm thinking, right? And so any tool that it takes to do that. So mood boarding is a really, really effective way to do that. Sharing any inspiration, having a conversation, like in a conversation with the client. Sometimes in our company's calls with clients, my boss will reference like a interior design store, like a furniture store, and be like, this type of feel instead of this type of, like,
hmm,
so just to get an anchor that everybody knows and is familiar with, so that you guys can start at the same place and then go in the same direction.
yeah.
That's
So
super
it's
important.
kind of like it's getting the language, everyone understanding the same language they're speaking, right?
Hmm.
What does like, I guess, if we're talking about ongoing clients, if we're talking with church leaders or with like retainer fee clients or even just one-off clients like artists, that kind of thing, I guess what we're trying to say is like, before you start, or if you're in the middle of the process right now, like take a pause and try and get on the same page about the language you guys are using.
Hmm.
Like maybe if it's like, you guys do an exercise where you learn like the words that we're going to be talking about, and actually doing some education, I think can be really helpful.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I'm picking up.
Yeah, and even if sometimes sometimes you'll ask and the client will say, I don't really know. I just want something that works for these, like, they just know what the functional purpose is, but they don't know like the aesthetic values yet. So a lot of times I get that with logos, when I work on logos with people, and every time that I do a logo for somebody, I'll always create. I have this sheet that's just two. It's a page front and back of like a whole grid of logos. So it's like 30 logos on a page, and then 30 logos on the other side. So there's 60 logos. And then I basically show the client this page, and then I ask them to point out what they like and what they don't like. And so usually when they do that, you can see a pattern in what they like and what they don't like. And oftentimes
Yeah.
clients will even, by the end of the exercise, they'll even be like, "Oh, I guess I like this type of stuff more than this type of stuff." And I don't really want a mascot. I don't want an emblem. I don't want any text logo or anything. Like, that's what they learn. And
Hmm.
that's what you learn. And so that has been extremely helpful for me. And so that's for logos, but of course, with like, it applies to anything. If you just show them a spread of a bunch of these things that already exist in the world that you don't have to go out there and create, you'll be like several steps ahead instead of just trying to shoot in the dark, or creating something you think is amazing, but that's like specifically something that they hate. you know.
Yeah, sure.
So yeah.
So if we're talking like this, so we're zooming out as overall creatives here, like working with clients from all backgrounds. Does this change when we start to look at this from like in a church or working with Christian organizations or just being a Christian in general? Like, do we have to take different approaches or measures to achieve the same result?
Yeah, I think as a Christian in the church, you don't you don't want to. I don't think you need to change the approach, like the methodology, but it definitely becomes a lot more important. I feel like, just because, number one, especially if you're working in a church, I mean, the most important thing to God about church is that we're unified. And if you're uh, a lot of disunity happens because of miscommunication. It's not actually because people hate each other. You know,
Mm.
people don't go into like friendships or relationships with people intending to like tear someone down. But it is because of these misunderstood slights, or I mean, in relationships too. I mean, I'm sure you have learned this a lot in marriage as well, but it's like there are things that I do specifically because I love my wife that actually communicate to her the exact opposite. you know and so,
Yeah, I can hear you laughing right now.
yeah, so exactly that exact same thing happens in a church, especially if you're working at a church or even a church as your client. And even if a church, if you're not even working for Christian clients, but you're working for just any corporate client, the relationship is really the means for you to, be a witness, an effective witness as a
Yeah,
believer, um, either to a Christian or to a non-Christian. And without effective and clear communication and having a good understanding between you and the other person, it's just not possible, you know.
yeah.
So
And I think
I
it's
think it's
important.
just more important. It just makes it more important.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, and I think like as well, it's important to remember that when you're in a business environment, when you're in a secular environment, a lot of the time people are there because they're qualified, literally, like they have the qualifications to be there, whether that's in marketing, art direction, they have some kind of like backup to like why they're in this position. So they may have gone to college, they may have a degree or a bachelor's or a doctorate or whatever in this specific thing. And so maybe they're more qualified on paper to give this advice or to give this thought. They've thought more about the marketing behind it. But quite often in the church, we're dealing with pastors who are qualified in their own right, but more to communicate the gospel, more to pastor people, and less about marketing strategies. Like they haven't studied that. So it is a really important thing, like to make sure communication is on the same page, because in a church, you're normally the expert that's been hired to execute the pastor's vision. Whereas in a business, you're there to like join the team and move it forward. Especially when we're talking about smaller churches, like when there's only one or two members of staff in each department, you carry a lot more weight than you would in the business. So it is super important to like have those communication channels like really clear and the language understood, because when you're explaining to a pastor like why you need to spend $800 a month on Facebook ads, like, and the strategy behind that, and they're just seeing money disappear, like they're thinking completely differently to how you're thinking, and you have to kind of have a very clear language so they have a good understanding of what's
Yeah,
actually
and the
happening.
other thing is that another really important thing to consider as a believer is that when you are working with church clients, like let's say I'm working for a local restaurant, right? And I design their branding, and then like a worst case scenario is they decide, hey, I hate all of your ideas, and I want you to make everything neon green, and it's going to be terrible. And I'm like, okay, honestly, if they want to do this, I'm going to do it for them, and their business is going to fail. It affects them, and it's okay. They're still paying me. And some people have that mindset,
Yeah.
but with a church, like, if let's say, like right now, I'm just going to talk about Christmas because I'm in the midst of a lot of Christmas work. If a church, like we had this happen to us where in this current project that I'm working on, we were trying to figure out a look for Christmas, right? And they came to us with art direction that um, would not have been very effective. Like it was very traditional, very classic, very like just have a photo and then put text on it, right? And as a church where this is your first Christmas back in person, we didn't believe it was going to be it was that effective, and it's not going to reach as many people. It's not going to really communicate to people that the Jesus that Christmas is about, can change your life. And
Sure.
Christmas
Yeah.
is the most important event for a church all year. And so because of that, like we challenged them continuously, like over a month of back and forth meetings, telling them like, this is why we don't think this is a good idea, and this is an alternate direction that we feel is better and more effective. And then taking all of their concerns and then addressing them over and over again until at the very end, the main concept and look doesn't even have an image in it anymore at all, you know? Um,
Yeah.
and so, like, because of that, because we understand like there's something greater at stake, there's it's not just that these people's decisions are going to affect their business negatively. They're going to affect all of their whole community negatively. It's not going to be effective. It's going to
Mm.
waste the season where a ton of people are in the building that for the rest of the year usually aren't.
Yeah.
So
And that's like the huge piece of being passionate about what you do. Like I feel like this whole process, what we're talking about, like building better relationships, as soon as you're as passionate about the person who employs you, as soon as you're as passionate about that project, you guys will have much better communication than if you're just dragging your feet and you don't want to be there.
that's right.
So like I guess a heart check for anyone watching right now is like, are you passionate about what you're doing? And if the answer is no, like what are you doing to fix that? Because you're gonna be way more effective if you're doing something you're passionate about, and you're gonna be a much better tool for the kingdom or for a business or for whatever if you're passionate about what you do.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's hugely important. Great point as well, Edward.
Yeah, so I mean, adding to the like mood board tool, I mean, I would also add, be braver. Like if you believe that you have an idea that is better, then be prepared to fight for it. Otherwise, is it really that good of an idea? If it's worth fighting for, then you shouldn't be afraid to challenge your client. And ultimately, the best clients will respect you for doing that and value that more than anything. It's really difficult actually to find people that you can pay to be honest with you.
Mm-hmm.
And then on another thing, I think is just, I think being able to use the client's words and their feedback um, back to them. you know so like when they say certain keywords, um, you take exactly what they said and then you make it into a design, and then as you present it to them, saying the exact words that they said back to them and showing that it's in there, is also a huge help, because they can't
Yeah.
They can't argue with their own words. I mean, some clients do, but most of them don't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's cool, man. Have you had any, just before I ask this next question, if you guys have got a question for Edward or for me about hot topics or about anything that he does, if you just type the question in the chat, we'll mark it as a question and we'll get around to answering that in a few minutes. So no question is too strange or too out there. Just feel free to ask anything and we'll get around to answering that in a second. Have you got any experiences, Ed, with like a time that you've worked on personally where the communication hasn't been good and like the project's fallen apart?
Um, yeah, I mean, I think plenty of times. I mean, oh man, okay, so there's this one year. So every year I designed this like 30-page book for a church, this mega church, of all the serving opportunities for with their local nonprofit partners. So any person could just like any church member can look at the book to find out how they can serve. So one year, um, like the first year I did it, they gave me picture references and then I made it based off that and they loved it and everything. The second year, they told me, we don't really know what we want, right? And so that should be a red flag right there where you're supposed to get like a mood board or whatever, but I didn't. And so I just went for it and I was like, hey, let's do this cover art with, it looks like a magazine. It's like more serious and more professional and more formal, and if it looks like a magazine, people will want to read it, right? And then they responded and were like, hey, this is not at all what we want. And like, this is too serious. We want it to be more fun and bright. And I was like, it would be great. It would have been great if you said that, but they didn't say that. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to make it more fun and more bright. And then we went through like 6 or 7 versions. And then we landed on a cover, and that's only the cover, right? We still have to go through the inside and lay everything out, the 30 pages of inside. And so I was working really hard, and we were behind schedule because of all of the cover revisions. And so I took that and I applied it to the entire inside of the book. I pulled all-nighter to do this. It was like a lot of work. And then they reply with this email saying, yeah, we're just overall really disappointed. Looks like it was just laid out in Word. Like this is like not what we expect from you guys and all that stuff. And then luckily I work at a great agency where my boss is always for me. And then my boss was like, don't reply. I got this. And then he wrote like an 18 paragraph response. And he was like, listen, first of all, you guys, he basically boiled it down to like, you guys can't keep moving the target and saying that we're missing the mark. And then he brought out the dates. He was like, on this date, we sent you this. And then you said this. You said you wanted it this way. So then we did this way. And then you wrote back on this date saying you actually wanted the opposite. And then you wrote back and he just wrote everything out. And then he was like, he was talking about, it's one thing if, we just missed the mark, but it's another thing if you guys keep changing what you want and then blaming us for it, and then he said, if you're going to continue giving this type of feedback to my team, then we will, he said, gracefully bow out of future projects. And then he told me, like, he was like, I will fire any client before I fire you guys, and then I was like,
Yeah.
and then, they call back and they're like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I understand. Like, the email that I wrote could have been understood that way. And I'm like really apologetic and all that stuff. And like, and then it was fine. The whole project turned out okay.
Yeah.
But it was very, very close to disaster. if you don't consider that disaster already, but
yeah. I mean, that's the honesty thing though, coming back in, right? Like building relationships with these clients and with church leaders is about having this like vulnerability, this element of trust, and just a place to be honest. And sometimes when you like, there's this fear that gets built up around being honest about what you saying, what you really think.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think the thing to remember is like good leaders will welcome honest feedback and they'll be there to have a conversation. They might not agree with it and they may have a differing opinion, but they're there to welcome it and have a conversation about it.
Right.
And like, if you're living in fear about giving honest feedback, you'll never be like the best creative you can be.
Hmm.
So being able to just go in there with some feedback and be honest about it is what fixed your problem, Edward, in that scenario, and is what can fix your communication issues as well. That's huge. So I guess if we were to like summarize some of the things you've just told us, like if you were to bullet point it, what would it be?
I would say, take, okay, so this is a nugget from my boss, but it's like creative work is 80% convincing the client that your ideas are good, and then 20% actual creative work. So approach it with that understanding, that mentality. Um, use an objective um, standard, or an objective reference for words that your client's using, so that you guys are on the same page. Always be on the same page before you do any creative work, before you jump into Photoshop and make anything. And then, always repeat the client's language back to them. And then just, like, if you believe that something can be better, um, be brave enough to challenge the direction that the project's going in to make it better. Those
Yeah.
are the main things, I think.
Those are the nuggets, yeah. Those are super helpful, man. Like I mean, I'm already now thinking about how I work that into my client relationships, and I imagine a lot of people here are as well.
Mm.
So I really appreciate you just sharing some of that wisdom, and I think we're just going to move into a time of like Q&As for the next few minutes. If you guys do have a question, put it in the chat. We'll mark it as a question. We'll bring it up on the screen, and we'll answer a few of these. We have a question here from Sam, and it says, how do you approach cold clients or people that you want to work with, but may not know who you are and what you can offer them?
Well, this is one of the hardest challenges of any salesperson forever. And because of that, I don't approach cold clients. I've actually, so there's two types of marketing. There's outbound marketing and inbound marketing. Outbound marketing is when you go out to somebody and then you talk to like you go and try and find the customer and then you bring them in, which is what advertising is for, or like what you're talking about, talking to cold clients, cold calling, cold emailing, stuff like that. And then there's inbound marketing, which is you doing stuff like search engine optimization. So when somebody searches, they can find you. Or like what Ruben and I have done is like be putting out a bunch of content so that I build an audience of potential clients that know me already. And then they come to me. And that is probably the best approach, I would say, in terms of creative work, especially because you're not like if you're selling a software product, then you might not be working on it all day. You might not have to spend much of your time like pleasing clients, so you have time to work on marketing. But as a creative, you don't really have time to do that because you have to work on your creative projects. And so what I would say is, work on inbound marketing, being as visible as you can possibly be, and letting clients come to you that way instead of going to try and create a relationship where there isn't one, and try to get somebody's attention where it isn't as well.
Yeah, I think that's been huge for me as well. I think when you're looking at outbound, or like when you're looking at just attracting people online and doing cold calling, that kind of thing, that only really works when you've got a lot of money to put behind it and you're able to like really push and be aggressive. So when you have sales teams and you have a big budget for ads and like just getting yourself out there, um, that's, but obviously like for us as smaller, as just individual people, probably with their own business and no employees, um, the whole like creating a space where you are able to like put your work out there and people will come and approach you because they want that specific thing. And this goes back to identifying like the niche area that you work in. If you can perfect that and nail it, and you just enjoy and are passionate about that space, and you find a way to show your passion online, or whether that's through a portfolio or through an exhibition or Instagram page or a YouTube channel, whatever it is, and you build relationships through that, people come to you as the expert or who's like knowledgeable in that area. That's really where you begin to get clients who, one, respect your opinion because they've come to you for a specific reason, but also ones that you have similar values and alignments with, so that you can work on the projects and probably have a better way of communicating.
Yeah, for
So
sure.
yeah, that's pretty important. But yeah, I love that inbound outbound thing. I think Megan called it push and pull as well. That's a good way of like simplifying that.
Exactly.
Hopefully that answers your question, Sam. We have a couple of other questions here. One of them is from Megan, and she says, "Can you show any of your recent mock-ups or volunteer books?"
I don't know if I
Putting you on
I
the
don't know
spot
if
a
I
bit.
can yet. Just
Oh,
because,
is it NDA?
yeah, they're not even public. But you can definitely see some of the past work on my website,
Oh yeah,
edwardcreates.com,
let me put that in the chat.
or even at the agency website, braintrustcreative.com.
There you go. Put that in the chat there. So the Brain Trust Creative, if I'm right, I think you guys got one of the yes. If you go and look at Brain Trust Creative's logo, it's insane. It's you can see the letters in the brain.
That's
I know
right.
it sounds like weird, but when you look at it, it works. It's really cool.
Yeah, that was my boss's idea.
Yeah, it's cool. For a while I didn't realize the letters were in there, and then one day I like made a discovery and realized they were.
Yeah.
And it like literally blew my mind.
Yeah, we kind of wanted that journey. We kind of wanted people to be like, "Oh yeah, I've seen it 100 times," and then I realized it's like the FedEx logo.
Yeah, right. Oh, and you've had a little website update, I see.
Yes, sir. Yes, I have.
Oh, I like it. Nice. Yeah, definitely go and check out Edward's website, guys. We've got probably a couple more minutes for more questions. So if you have something to ask, please ask now. Don't miss this opportunity to ask some. I mean, like Edward's like one of the wisest people I know. So don't miss this opportunity to ask a question. I see Matthew's joined the room. Mr. Matthews just moved.
What up?
Moved to
Yes,
Virginia.
making big moves.
Is it Virginia?
Congratulations.
Yeah, Liberty University. Very cool.
You're gonna be changing the entire world now.
Oh, here we go. Megan says, "Can you explain what Christmas themes you are seeing?" And Megan, do you mean as in like some of the trends we're seeing this year? What do you mean by that?
So
Both.
yeah, I've got. I mean, Ruben might be able to speak more to the trends, because I've just been, I've just had my head down in these specific, like, client specific projects. But what I've noticed is that I've got two big Christmas clients this year, and both of them want lettering work. That was, I mean, I didn't expect that. I don't know why that's happening. Both of them kind of had like a completely different reasoning for why they wanted it, but that's what I'm doing. I'm doing custom lettering for both of them.
Wow.
Yeah.
Are you outsourcing that, or are you doing that yourself?
I'm doing it myself.
Wow.
Yes.
That's some skills, man.
It is time consuming, but it is very rewarding at the end.
I bet.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm excited to see this when you drop it. In terms of trends I'm seeing, illustration's huge. That's been around for a couple of years. Like that whole illustration trend was really kind of taken off last year. Then I'm seeing a lot of like going back to the classics as well. A lot of churches that I've been in contact with have all been thinking about how do we go back to like the meaning of Christmas, the origin of Christmas, and bring back some nostalgia as well. So a lot of people have like looked at kind of the old 50s style, 1980s style, like you guys had a magazine like a catalog. Is it called Sears? There was like this Sears.
Yeah.
So a
Sears
lot of
catalog.
like, if you look at the covers from the Christmas catalogs from Sears, you will see they're all the same over the like 90s and 80s, and a lot of people have been wanting to go back to that, which I think is really cool.
Interesting.
So yeah, classic. One of my clients wanted part of it was a Wes Anderson style. So like the color schemes, the way the images look. So that's been fun to like kind of come up with some ideas around that as well. So I think that one of the main things, I guess, is just people have been like wanting to embrace new things rather than just being text and patterns. They wanted to like try different styles out, and that's been cool. And I think COVID mainly did that. People started having their eyes open to different ways of being creative that wasn't just a photo shoot with a bumper video and some text, which they could do when COVID was around or wasn't around.
Exactly.
And then as soon as everything got locked down, they were like, okay, now I need to like animate or illustrate because I don't have a way to like bring people together. So yeah, I think we're still seeing the effects of that, but it's been very cool. Cool. I think we've got time for one more question, if anyone has one, or we're going to wrap things up here. And we'll be back for. Someone said, "What's that noise?"
Huh? Is there a
That's
noise?
not really a question.
Is that me?
There's like a. I think it's you,
Oh no.
but it's not really that bad. So we're going to call it time here. I think there's no more questions coming in. I'll give you guys like 1 more minute. If one does come in, I'll answer it. But this has been Hot Topics episode 2, which has been about understanding client relationships. Maybe the client isn't the problem. So that's been super fun. Really appreciate you, Edward, for like just sharing some wisdom on that. And every time we do a live, I literally always leave, go and talk to my wife and be like, how cool is Edward? Like, I just want to talk to him all the time.
Me.
So we're
I'm
going to be
so
doing.
sorry again
No,
that I was so late. I'm so sorry. It will never happen again.
well, no, thank you. Well, you weren't late. You weren't late. The internet just wasn't working. You weren't late. But we really appreciate you being here, and it actually kind of helped us to condense some stuff down anyway, so that was good. So yeah, so the third Thursday of every month. So the next in November, we'll be back for Hot Topics on the third Thursday of that month. We'll be a step like getting a time set with our person we're going to have on, and then we'll announce that on Instagram. So stay tuned for that. And you guys can join us as well. We talked about building community, building relationships. You guys can join us every week on a Wednesday at 4 p.m. Eastern for our happy hour. We just hang out, chat, and it's a way to make connections. And hopefully you'll see that work through to the churches you connect with, the clients you connect with. And we'd love to just help you guys on that journey. So thank you so much, Edward. If you guys want to watch this again, this is going to be, there's going to be a restream link coming out in a couple of hours. And then this will be on YouTube in the coming weeks. Keep an eye out for that. And there'll be some content that's broken down and put on the Pro Church Media page. So you guys can check that out as well. Really appreciate you guys. Appreciate you, Edward, as well, for just bringing your wisdom.
Peace.
And we'll see you guys soon.